In this video, we're going to be replacing the driver's side front strut on this 2008 Acura MDX. We will be reusing the coil spring from the old strut. We'll be compressing it and putting it onto this unit. We're going to take our wheel off and use a 22mm socket. All right, so we're going to be removing our strut, which means we need to remove this bracket off of the strut. A 10mm socket. I'm going to take out our top sway bar link bolt. It's going to be an 18mm on the back side and an 18mm on the front side. Now what we can do is just push that straight back out of the strut. Might have to angle it just a little bit. If it doesn't want to go, wait for other things to be loose. You don't want to ruin the threads by hammering this straight back. Take our brake hose bracket off of the strut as well. That's going to be a 12mm socket. So our two bolts connecting the strut to the knuckle, we're going to back these out, just loosen them free a little bit. It's going to be a 24mm on both sides. Go ahead and loosen those up now. On this side, we're going to have a little issue getting our socket in there, so we're going to use the wrench on this side, and a socket on the other. Again, just loosen them up. So what we're going to do now is support our control arm and our lower suspension when we go ahead and remove our strut. We're just going to put it down onto a jack stand, like that. And in our case, what we can do now is just lower the vehicle down onto that jack stand without putting too much pressure on the suspension. We're just going to support it and not push it up. Now to gain access to the top bolts for our strut, if you see you have 3 access panels up here in the top plastic. We're going to remove those. I'm going to use a pick tool to start. If that doesn't work for us, we'll move to a panel tool. That one there could benefit from the panel tool. Again, looks like somebody's been in here before us. These clips are broken. Now we have access to our top 3 strut bolts. We're going to remove those. They're going to be 15mm bolts. Just going to break them all free. Try not to drop them in here. So now that we're back down to the knuckle and the strut here, we can remove these two bolts holding the strut to the knuckle. Remember, we loosen these, so these should thread off. Might need a little help. Back side on this one's still spinning. All right, now these bolts should back right out. They're under a little bit of pressure, so they might not come out. The bottom one is. What we're gonna do for the top is just use the impact, see if we can back that bolt out on its own, like so. Now our strut assembly is free. We're gonna get our sway bar link out. Now our strut just come free from the vehicle. And we're just gonna work it off the knuckle. Just be careful of your CV axle boot down below and your brake hose. Now we can lower our strut. And work it out. All right, so we're going to set up our strut and our spring compressor. We can go ahead and compress our spring. Just want to work this slowly, keeping an eye as much as you can, make sure nothing's loose. What we're looking for is that spring to just be loose inside this strut assembly, which I think we are very close. So now that we have our spring compressed, I'm going to go ahead and back this top nut out. We're going to try and impact it with a 19 millimeter. If not, we'll have to get a couple of wrenches here. We'll see what we can do with this. We're not looking to take it all the way off right now. We're just going to loosen it up. No, so the whole center is spinning. All right, so now with a 19 millimeter wrench and a 9 millimeter on top, we're going to loosen this up. Okay. A 9 millimeter wrench to hold the top. Now we can drop our center strut right out. So we're going to take this bottom out. Now our new strut assembly, we're going to put on the bushing piece that we reused from the old strut. Just going to rotate that until it falls into position here. There is an indent where your bottom or end of a spring will meet, also in the cup. Now we can put our boot on. Slide that into position there. All right, now we can take our entire assembly, put it up into our spring, put our nut on top, compress everything back down. Now we can raise our strut assembly into the spring. Make sure that last coil is seated into position. Put the top hat on. And our nut. What we're going to need on top to lock our center piston is going to be an Allen. This is going to be a number 6. And an 18mm wrench. We're just going to get a few threads going to the point where we are compressing the piston in the bottom plate, and then we can make sure our bottom coil is in place. We've bottomed out our top bolt. We're going to go ahead and release tension on our spring. Through the machine, we have no tension on our coil spring. We can start to remove the arms on the machine. And so now that we've loosened up all of our locking tabs, our ears here are free, we can work our strut out of the machine. Let's install it. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your 3 top bolts on the top of your strut. You're going to align them with the bolt holes up in the fender well. They do look somewhat equidistant, but they are offset a little bit. So you're going to have to clock it into the right position. That's going to be your first step, is getting those 3 into position. So we're going to put our strut in through there. Again, just watch out for your CV boot. All right, so that's your orientation. So what we've done is got our 3 bolts lined up top and pushed in place. And then we just took the bottom here and rested it right on top of the knuckle, which now allows us to go up top and thread on our top bolts. So we know that our strut isn't in the right position. What we're doing now is just threading these on just to hold that top plate in position. So we're just snugging these up. They do have a torque spec. We'll torque them down in a minute. We can torque these down. Torque spec is going to be 43 foot-pounds. Just revisit that one. Go ahead and reinsert our plastic covers. Just press into place. All right, now we can move down below. Now what we're going to do is put our strut back on our knuckle. You can see our knuckle's pretty well out of line. But if we move our sway bar link in, we can see that we're pretty close with the strut. So you get an idea of what needs to move where. So what we're going to do is take our knuckle, kind of swing it back into position. I'm going to use a Phillips screwdriver just as a little bit of a lever to get me close. All right, so we're kind of close. Just be careful of your brake hose and your ABS speed sensor wire while you're doing this. And we can take that out. We will reuse it again in a minute. And we're going to spin and try and get the two to connect. Like that. There is an inner ridge in here, so we're going to have to get past that, which means a little bit more rotation. So we'll use the screwdriver for. And so not much more rotation left there. So we'll try the strut, a little bit more in the strut. All right, so we're past that lip. Try and squeeze them together. Once you get your bolt holes somewhere in the right vicinity of each other, we're going to use a screwdriver and get us even closer. We're going to put it through either the top or the bottom, and we're just going to pry up, down, left, right, whichever way it needs to go, and we'll start working our bolts through. So what I'm doing is just turning it by hand and pushing to try and get it to go through. Now that we've gotten most of the way, we've kind of locked our knuckle in place. We're going to go for the top. Got your top bolt in, just go ahead and work it through just like we did the bottom. Just if you're going to do this, just watch your fingers. If you grab your rotor, a little bit of wiggling might help align that like that. Same thing on the bottom. All right, once we get it through enough so we can thread our nuts on this side, we're good. So now that we have our bolts most of the way through, take our nuts and thread them on. Same thing on the bottom. All right, what we want to do here is just lightly snug them up. When we torque them down, we want to have the suspension under a little load. So we'll snug them up now. 24 millimeter front and back. I'm just going to back that out just a little bit. All right. Now we can put our sway bar link in position. And with this specific one, it's just a nylon lock nut. So now we can tighten our sway bar link down. We can torque it. We're going to torque it down to 58 foot-pounds. All right, now we've got to a point where the back is spinning again, so we're going to use an 18 millimeter wrench to hold the actual part in place, and we'll torque it down. I'm just going to let that wrench spin and lock against the strut. So now we can torque down our two strut bolts to our knuckle. I'm going to torque them down to 158 foot-pounds. I'm going to use a 24 millimeter wrench on one side, torque wrench on the other with a 24 millimeter. We'll torque them down. So when we torque these down, you want to make sure your vehicle suspension on whichever side you're doing is under load, meaning you want to have at least close to the same weight of your vehicle pushing upwards when you torque your bolts down. All right, so now we can put our brake hose back into position, our 12mm bolt. All right, so now we can reattach our speed sensor ABS cable. There's a little hook on this bracket. I'm just going to find the location for it. Put it into place. We can put our 10mm bolt in place. And tighten that down. All right, so now at this point, what you want to do is take your vehicle off of your jack stand or lift, supporting your lower suspension. Put your wheel back on, lower it onto the ground. For the 22mm socket, we're just going to snug these up. Now with the vehicle on the ground, we can go ahead and torque down our lug nuts. We're going to do it in a crisscross pattern. I'm going to torque them to 90 foot-pounds. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.